This narration is based on the final accident report published by the National Transportation Safety Board. The report was adopted on February 2, 2010. The facts, findings, and probable cause presented here reflect the information available at that time. Flight and Aircraft Overview on February 12, 2009 at approximately 10:17 in the evening Eastern Standard Time. A Colgan Air Bombardier DHC-8-400, also known as the Q400, registration N200WQ, was operating as Continental Connection, Flight 3407. The airplane was on an instrument landing system, approach to Runway 23 at Buffalo-Niagara International Airport in Buffalo, New York. During the approach, the airplane experienced a loss of control and crashed into a single-family residence in Clarence Center, New York, about 5 nautical miles northeast of the airport. All 49 people aboard the airplane were killed. That included 2 pilots, 2 flight attendants, and 45 passengers. 1 person on the ground inside the residence was also killed. The airplane was destroyed by impact forces and a post-crash fire. The flight was operating under the provisions of 14 Code of Federal Regulations, Part 121. Night visual meteorological conditions prevailed at the time of the accident. The Q400 is manufactured by Bombardier as a medium-range, high-wing, T-tail airplane powered by 2 Pratt and Whitney Canada PW150A turbopropeller engines. The airplane was certified to carry 74 passengers and 4 crew members. The accident airplane was manufactured in April 2008 and had accumulated 1,819 total hours and 1,809 total flight cycles at the time of the accident. Weather and runway condition. The weather observation at Buffalo at 9:54 in the evening indicated winds from 240 degrees at 15 knots, gusting to 22 knots. Visibility 3 miles in light snow and mist. A few clouds were at 1,100 feet above ground level. The ceiling was broken at 2,100 feet and overcast at 2,700 feet. The temperature was 1 degree Celsius. Dew point was -1 degree Celsius, and the altimeter setting was 29.79 inches of mercury. The 5-minute observation at 10:15 in the evening indicated wind from 250 degrees at 14 knots. Visibility 3 miles in light snow and mist, with a ceiling overcast at 2,100 feet. Numerous pilot reports about icing conditions in the Buffalo area were received during the day of the accident between 12:50 and 6:15 in the evening. These included reports of light to moderate, and moderate rime, icing from 3,000 to 14,000 feet in the area. A post-accident survey of pilots operating into Buffalo around the time of the accident found that varying intensities of icing conditions were occurring between 2,000 and 12,000 feet. The pilots were aware of the potential for icing conditions and were not surprised by the encounters. None of the pilots considered the icing conditions significant enough to formally report. Approach setup and speed policy, the home base of operations for both the captain and the first officer, was Newark Liberty International Airport in New Jersey. The flight crew's first 2 scheduled flights of the day had been canceled because of high winds at Newark and resulting ground delays. The dispatch release for Flight 3407 was issued at 6:00 in the evening, with an estimated departure time of 7:10 and an estimated en route time of 53 minutes. The intended cruise altitude was 16,000 feet. During the climb to altitude, the propeller de-ice and airframe de-ice equipment were activated, and the autopilot was engaged. The ref speed switch, located on the ice protection panel above the captain's seat, was set to the increase position. This switch adjusts the stall warning system so that the stick shaker activates at a lower angle of attack, providing the same performance margins in icing conditions as during clean flight, provided the landing airspeeds are increased accordingly. At approximately 9:53 in the evening, the first officer briefed the airspeeds for landing with the flaps at 15 degrees as 118 knots for the reference landing speed and 114 knots for the go-around speed. The captain acknowledged this information. However, these speeds were not appropriate for an airplane configured for flight in icing conditions. The first officer had not entered the keywords icing or ice when requesting landing performance data from the aerodata system. If she had, the reference landing speed would have been 138 knots, a 20-knot increase captain did not challenge these speeds. Second by second, final segment. At approximately 10:03 in the evening, the flight crew made initial contact with Buffalo approach control and was cleared to plan an instrument landing system approach to runway 23. At approximately 10:14, the airplane reached its assigned altitude of 2,300 feet. The airspeed was about 180 knots. At 10:15:06, the captain called for the flaps to be moved to the 5-degree position. Beginning at approximately 10:16:00, the captain reduced the engine power levers to about 42 degrees, near flight idle. Both engines' torque values were at minimum thrust. The captain was slowing the airplane rapidly, less than 3 miles from the outer marker. This rapid slowdown was necessary because the airspeed at that point, 184 knots, was too fast for the airplane's position relative to the glide slope. At approximately 10:16:09, the low-speed cue began to rise from the bottom of the airspeed display as the airspeed slowed. The low-speed cue is a red and black vertical bar that warns pilots of an inappropriately low airspeed. Neither pilot remarked on or reacted to this cue during the next 18 seconds. During this time, the autopilot was maintaining altitude by adding nose-up pitch trim. The pitch trim increased from 1 degree to 7 degrees nose up, and the pitch attitude increased from 3 degrees to 9 degrees nose up. Neither pilot remarked about the increasing pitch attitude. At approximately 10:16:21, the first officer reported the gear was down. The airspeed was about 145 knots. An ice-detected message appeared on the engine display. The captain called for flaps 15 and the before-landing checklist. Flaps were initially selected to 10 degrees, and the airspeed was about 135 knots. At 10:16:27, the stick shaker activated. The stick shaker warns a pilot of an impending wing stall through vibrations on the control column, providing both tactile and oral cues. The autopilot disconnected automatically. The airspeed at that moment was 131 knots, which was 13 knots higher than the non-icing reference speed the crew had set, but 7 knots below the icing reference speed of 138 knots. At 10:16:27, the control columns moved aft. The captain applied a third 47-pound pull force to the control column, which was the opposite of the correct stall recovery procedure. 1 second later, the engine power levers were advanced to about 70 degrees. Engine power increased to about 75% torque. In response to the captain's aft control column inputs, the airplane pitched up. The angle of attack increased to 13 degrees. The pitch attitude increased to about 18 degrees. The load factor increased from 1 to about 1.4 GS. The airspeed decreased to 125 knots. The wing stalled, and the airplane rolled to the left, reaching a roll angle of 45 degrees left, wing down. The airplane then rolled to the right through wings level. At approximately 10:16:34, the stick pusher activated for the first time. The stick pusher applies a nose-down input to both control columns to decrease the wing angle of attack and help the airplane recover from a stall. After the first stick pusher activation, the captain applied a 41-pound pull force to the column, and flaps 0 was selected. At 10:16:37, the first officer told the captain that she had put the flaps up. The flaps began to retract. The airspeed was about 100 knots. The roll angle reached 105 degrees right, wing down. At approximately 10:16:40, the stick pusher activated a second time. After this activation, the captain applied a 90-pound pull force. The roll angle reached about 35 degrees left, wing down, before rolling again to the right. The first officer asked whether she should put the landing gear up. The captain stated gear up and an expletive. The airplane's pitch and roll angles reached about 25 degrees airplane nose down and 100 degrees right, wing down. The airplane entered a steep descent. The stick pusher activated a third time at approximately 10:16:50. The captain applied a 160-pound pull force to the control column. The flaps were fully retracted at approximately 10:16:52. At about the same time, the captain stated, "We're down." The airplane struck the residence. A post-crash fire followed. The cockpit voice recorder recording ended at approximately 10:16:54. Touchdown and structural failure sequence. The airplane impacted the south side of the house near ground level, and pieces of the airplane traveled through the structure, coming to rest beyond the northeast corner of the house foundation. A ground scar on the south side of the house measured 15 feet long, 5 feet wide, and 3 feet deep. 2 trees along the southern boundary of the property were struck by the airplane, with their tops sheared off at approximately 20 and 25 feet above ground level. Tree debris showed clean, angled cuts consistent with propeller impact. The airplane wreckage was on a magnetic heading of 70 degrees. Approximately 60% of the main structural components could be identified. All examined fracture surfaces showed signs consistent with overload failure. No evidence indicated any pre-impact failures. Wreckage distribution and distances. The airplane wreckage was mostly contained within the property boundaries at 6038 Long Street, Clarence Center, New York. The airplane was severely fragmented with extensive fire damage. The empennage was found intact. A section of the outboard right wing impacted the garage of an adjacent house. The right forward cargo door was recovered across the street with impact damage but little fire damage. The flap actuator measurements were consistent with the flaps being close to the fully retracted position. The landing gear retract actuators were found in the almost fully retracted position. The ice protection panel was severely burned, but the ref speed switch was found set to the increase position. Injuries and the report's serious injury definition. The accident resulted in 50 fatalities. 2 flight crew, 2 cabin crew, 45 passengers, and 1 person on the ground were killed. There were no survivors. The Erie County Medical Examiner's office determined that the cause of death for all victims was multiple blunt force trauma. The National Transportation Safety Board determined that the accident was not survivable. Crew experience and duty context. The captain was 47 years old and held an airline transport pilot certificate. He received his DHC-8 type rating on November 18, 2008. Colgan flight records indicated that he had accumulated 3,379 hours of total flying time, including 111 hours on the Q400. He had received 4 FAA certificate disapprovals during his career before joining Colgan in September 2005. The captain attended the Gulfstream Training Academy from August 2004 to April 2005. where he served as second in command on the Beech 1900D. His training records at Gulfstream showed continuing difficulties with aircraft control, including unsatisfactory grades in approach to stall exercises and repeated airspeed and altitude deviations. At Colgan, the captain received additional training flags. In October 2006, he received an unsatisfactory grade on his recurrent proficiency check in the SOB 340. In October 2007, he was disapproved for his upgrade proficiency check. The captain commuted from his home near Tampa, Florida, to Newark. He did not have a crash pad in the Newark area. On the night before the accident, no information was found regarding where the captain slept. He was observed in the crew room at Newark on the morning of February 12, and a first officer saw him asleep there during the morning. He performed office work between noon and 2:00 in the afternoon, and was observed watching television and talking with other pilots throughout the afternoon. The first officer was 24 years old and held a commercial pilot certificate. She received her DHC-8 type rating on March 16, 2008. She had accumulated 2,244 hours of total flying time, including 774 hours on the Q400, before joining Colgan in January 2008. She worked as a flight instructor on the Piper PA-28, where she had taught or performed between 600 and 1,000 approach to stall recoveries. The first officer had relocated from Norfolk, Virginia, to the Seattle area in late January 2009 to be closer to family. She commuted from Seattle to Newark and did not have a crash pad. On February 11, she departed Seattle at 7:51 in the evening Pacific time aboard a cargo flight, arrived in Memphis at 2:30 in the morning Eastern time on February 12, then continued to Newark on another cargo flight, arriving at 6:23 in the morning. She stated that one of the couches in the crew room had her name on it. Several pilots reported seeing her sleeping in the crew room during the day. A text message at 1:05 in the afternoon indicated she had taken a 6-hour nap during taxi before 10,000 feet. The cockpit voice recorder captured the first officer stating that she felt unwell and considered calling in sick. She also described her limited experience with icing conditions, stating she had never seen icing conditions or de-iced an airplane before her initial operating experience at Colgan. Aircraft configuration and weights. The accident airplane's estimated landing weight was approximately 54,700 pounds. The airplane was equipped with two Dowty six-bladed propellers. At the time of the accident, the propeller de-ice, airframe de-ice, and pitot static de-icing equipment were all active. The aerodata system provided the crew with landing performance information for a clean airplane configuration. Because the crew had not entered the icing keywords, the reference landing speed provided was 118 knots for a flaps 15 landing, rather than the 138 knots that would have been appropriate for icing conditions. Company landing, standard operating procedures and definitions. Colgan's Flight Operations Policies and Procedures Manual included stabilized approach criteria. Below 1,000 feet above ground level in instrument conditions, the airplane was to be at an airspeed not less than the reference landing speed and not greater than the reference speed plus 20 knots. Colgan's standard operating procedures at the time of the accident did not specifically require flight crews to cross-check the approach speed bug settings in relation to the ref speed switch position. The company's approach checklist also did not include a callout for the ref speed switch, stall protection system, and findings. The Q400 stall protection system includes a stick shaker and a stick pusher. The stick shaker is a stall warning device that provides oral and tactile warnings of an impending stall. The stick pusher activates after an aerodynamic stall has occurred, applying a nose-down elevator input to reduce the angle of attack. The investigation found that the captain's response to stick shaker activation should have been automatic, but his improper flight control inputs were inconsistent with his training and were instead consistent with startle and confusion. The captain did not recognize the stick pusher's action to decrease angle of attack as a proper step in a stall recovery. His repeated pull forces to override the stick pusher, escalating from 41 pounds to 90 pounds to 160 pounds, exacerbated the situation. The airplane performance study showed that the airplane experienced minimal performance degradation from ice accumulation. The angle of attack at the time of the wing stall was about 1 degree above the expected angle for a clean wing stall warning. The airplane could have been operated at the non-icing reference speed with a substantial margin remaining above the actual point of stall. Flight control's findings, flight control continuity, could not be determined because of severe fragmentation and burn damage. However, all examined fracture surfaces showed signs consistent with overload failure, and no evidence indicated any pre-impact failures in the flight control systems. The ice protection panel was recovered and found to be severely burned. The ref speed switch was found set to the increase position. Both engine power levers and the number 1 engine condition lever appeared to be in the full forward position. Wing, fuel, and fire findings. No evidence indicated an in-flight fire. The fire damage occurred as a result of the crash. The post-crash fire was also fed by a severed natural gas service pipeline at the residence. The natural gas service pipeline was not equipped with an excess flow valve, which, if installed, would have closed and stopped the flow of gas. The pipeline operator shut off the gas flow approximately 12 hours after the accident. 1 house and 2 cars were destroyed. An adjacent garage sustained damage from a section of the airplane's outboard right wing. Engines and maintenance items. Both engines showed compressor blades bent opposite to the direction of rotation, fractured blades, and ingested dirt, consistent with engine operation at impact. No evidence of turbine failure or uncontainment was found in either engine. A review of the airplane's logbook from April 2008 to February 2009 revealed no chronic issues with the primary or secondary flight control systems. The right side ice detector probe had been replaced earlier on the day of the accident at Albany after an ice detect fail caution light illuminated on a previous flight. The replacement was tested and found satisfactory. ELT behavior. The report does not provide specific details regarding the emergency locator transmitter behavior for this accident. Flight recorders and component analysis. The airplane was equipped with a Honeywell solid-state cockpit voice recorder and a Honeywell solid-state flight data recorder. Both recorders were recovered in good condition. The cockpit voice recorder contained a 2-hour, 1-minute recording with excellent quality audio data. A transcript was prepared. A sound spectrum study was performed to resolve an inconsistency involving stick shaker activation timing. The flight data recorder contained approximately 26 hours, 30 minutes of data, including about 58 minutes from the accident flight. Of the total parameters recorded, 121 were deemed relevant to the accident circumstances. The NTSB conducted aircraft performance studies and simulation studies using Bombardier DHC-8-400 aerodynamic, engine, and flight control models. 3 alternate flight control input scenarios were evaluated, which showed that pilot intervention was required to avoid stalling the airplane after autopilot disconnect. The simulation confirmed that the airplane, with a conservative icing factor, had adequate performance capability to maintain either constant pitch attitude or constant altitude, evacuation, and emergency response details. The Clarence Center Fire Company was the first emergency response organization to arrive at the scene. Several other local emergency organizations responded within 15 minutes of the accident, including the Niagara Airport Police, Erie County Sheriff Department, New York State Police, and neighboring fire departments. The natural gas distribution pipeline operator was notified at approximately 11:58 in the evening. A crew arrived on scene at 12:33 in the morning and shut off gas to homes on both sides of the accident site. They could not initially shut off the gas at the destroyed home because the shutoff valve and meter were in the fire area. The gas flow was not stopped until approximately 10:45 the following morning, about 12 hours after the accident. Investigation focus areas. The investigation examined the following focus areas: strategies to prevent flight crew monitoring failures, pilot professionalism, fatigue, including commuting pilots' use of company crew rooms, remedial training for pilots with performance deficiencies, pilot training records and record retention, airspeed selection, procedures for icing conditions, stall training, including stick pusher familiarization, Federal Aviation Administration oversight of Colgan during its rapid growth, flight operational quality assurance programs, the use of personal portable electronic devices on the flight deck, the FAA's use of safety alerts for operators to transmit safety-critical information, and whether information provided to pilots, organizations assisting. The following organizations were parties to the investigation: the Federal Aviation Administration, Colgan Air, Bombardier, the National Air Traffic Controllers Association, the Airline Pilots Association, the Association of Flight Attendants, Pratt and Whitney Canada, the Transportation Safety Board of Canada, Probable Cause and Contributing Factors. The National Transportation Safety Board determined that the probable cause of this accident was the captain's inappropriate response to the activation of the stick shaker, which led to an aerodynamic stall from which the airplane did not recover. Contributing to the accident were, first, the flight crew's failure to monitor airspeed in relation to the rising position of the low-speed queue. Second, the flight crew's failure to adhere to sterile cockpit procedures. Third, the captain's failure to effectively manage the flight. And fourth, Colgan Air's inadequate procedures for airspeed selection and management during approaches in icing conditions. Safety recommendations. As a result of this investigation, the NTSB issued 25 new safety recommendations to the Federal Aviation Administration. These recommendations addressed the following areas: requiring operators to review standard operating procedures for consistency with flight crew monitoring guidance, requiring yellow or amber cautionary bands on airspeed indicators above the low-speed queue, requiring low airspeed alert systems with redundant oral and visual warnings for commercial airplanes, issuing guidance and requiring training on leadership for upgrading captains, developing and distributing multimedia guidance materials on professionalism in aircraft operations, including sterile cockpit adherence, requiring operators to address fatigue risks associated with commuting pilots, requiring documentation and retention of detailed pilot training and checking records, requiring sharing of training records with hiring employers under the Pilot Records Improvement Act, directing operators of airplanes equipped with reference speed switches to develop procedures ensuring approach speed bugs always match the switch position, requiring training that incorporates fully developed stalls, unexpected stall scenarios, and autopilot disengagement requiring stick pusher familiarization training, defining minimum simulator fidelity requirements for stall recovery training, identifying which airplanes are susceptible to tailplane stalls, and providing appropriate training accordingly, developing more stringent surveillance standards for operators experiencing rapid growth or changes, requiring flight operational quality assurance programs with data sharing, prohibiting personal electronic devices on the flight deck, implementing a process to document operator responses to safety alerts, requiring weather documents to contain all pertinent weather information, and updating icing intensity definitions in the Aeronautical Information Manual. The NTSB also reiterated a previous recommendation on modifying flight crew hours of service regulations to consider factors shown by scientific evidence to affect crew alertness. Closing. This concludes the narration of National Transportation Safety Board Accident Report, AAR 1001, regarding the loss of control on approach of Colgan Air Flight 3407 in Clarence Center, New York, on February 12, 2009. The investigation led to significant legislative and regulatory changes in the United States aviation industry, including the Airline Safety and Federal Aviation Administration Extension Act of 2010, which established new requirements for pilot qualifications, training, and fatigue management. The 50 lives lost in this accident are remembered through these enduring safety improvements.